had a really unnerving experience about 5 weeks ago at a Target. I visit that store all the time, so I didn't think twice about heading there around 8:30 p.m. one evening. It was a little quieter than usual since it was later in the day, and not many shoppers were around. After grabbing a few items, I wandered toward one of the far corners of the store where it was nearly empty. As I was looking through the aisles, I noticed someone rounding the corner from the next aisle over. He was wearing a red Target employee shirt, and I figured he was coming to ask if I needed help. He had dark brown hair, stood around 6 feet tall, and looked a bit out of place, like he wasn't used to the job yet. Sure enough, he walked up to me and asked, "Do you need help finding anything?" I politely declined, letting him know I had everything under control, but he seemed a bit persistent. "We've got some good deals going on. I can show you a few things," he added. I smiled and declined again, saying I was all set. He shrugged and walked away, and honestly, I didn't think much of it. I finished my shopping, paid for my items at the checkout, and headed toward my car, parked halfway back in the lot. It was dark by then, and the parking lot had a few scattered cars but not much foot traffic. I began unloading my bags into the trunk when I suddenly felt someone approaching from behind me. When I turned around, my heart sank. It was the same guy from inside the store, but now he wasn't in his Target uniform. He was wearing sweatpants and a black hoodie pulled up over his head. The change in his appearance was jarring, and I immediately felt my guard go up. He walked right up to me and said, "Hey, could you give me a ride? It's not far, I promise." His tone was casual, but everything about the situation felt off. I tried to stay calm, but I could hear the unease in my voice as I replied, "Sorry, I can't do that." He didn't move. He just stood there, staring at me with this strange, unsettling smile on his face. "Come on," he said. "It's just a short ride. I really need a lift." I took a step back and tried to stay composed, my mind racing. Why would he need a ride when he supposedly worked here? I asked him, "Don't you work at Target? I saw you inside not even 20 minutes ago." To my shock, he denied it. "Nah, I don't work here," he said, shaking his head like I was mistaken. But I knew it was him. He had spoken to me in the store. There was no question about it. Now my stomach was in knots. He moved a little closer and I instinctively backed up, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. "I just need to go a few miles. It won't take long." He pressed again. There was something almost desperate about him now, and the way he lingered so close made me feel trapped. "I said I can't help you," I repeated, more firmly this time, edging toward the driver's side door of my car. But as I reached for the handle, he lunged forward, grabbing at my arm. I yanked it away and quickly ducked around the car, putting it between us as a barrier. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I could feel the adrenaline surging through me. "Just get in the car," he muttered, his voice lower now, more menacing. I knew I had to act fast. I made a break for the driver's seat, unlocking the door and scrambling inside. My hands were shaking as I slammed the door shut and immediately locked it. The guy didn't give up, though. He hurried over to the driver's side window, knocking on it like nothing had happened. He was still trying to act like everything was normal, but his eyes gave him away. There was something dark behind them. For a second, I thought he was going to try and break in, but thankfully no one was parked in front of me. I threw the car into reverse, then hit the gas, speeding out of the parking lot. I didn't look back. My heart was racing as I pulled out onto the main road, and it wasn't until I was a few blocks away that I let out the breath I'd been holding. I couldn't stop thinking about it afterward. What was his deal? Why was he pretending to work at Target, and why did he follow me out to the parking lot? I shudder to think what could have happened if I hadn't gotten away in time. Even now, weeks later, the whole situation leaves me feeling uneasy. I'm just grateful I trusted my instincts and didn't give in to his demands. Last week I went to Target on what I thought would be a quiet, uneventful evening. I just needed a couple of skincare products, nothing major, and since it was late, the store was practically empty. It was one of those Targets with just one entrance, located on the far left side of the building. When I walked in, I headed straight to the far right corner where the beauty and skincare aisles were. As I browsed through the shelves, everything seemed calm at first. No one else was in the aisle, and I figured it would be a quick trip. Maybe 5 minutes into looking at the products, I felt that familiar sensation when you just know someone's nearby. I didn't see anyone, but I could sense that someone had entered the aisle. You know how you can feel a presence before you actually see them? That's exactly what happened. I kept my focus on the products, not wanting to seem paranoid, but I felt this tension building. After what felt like too long, I finally glanced over casually and spotted him, just standing at the far end of the aisle, staring at me. He wasn't smiling, didn't look angry, just staring. Our eyes locked for a second, and I quickly looked away, feeling uncomfortable. I decided it was time to move on. I went over to the next aisle to grab a couple of other things I needed. As I was picking up the last item, I saw him again. He had followed me. I tried to stay calm, but it was unsettling. He stepped closer, and I couldn't help but ask, "Can I help you with something?" His response was just, "Yes," without any further explanation. That was my cue to leave. I didn't want to stick around to figure out what he really wanted. I left that aisle and walked down one of the main pathways of the store, passing the grocery section. I thought I'd lost him, but when I glanced back, he was there again, about 20 feet behind me. My heart rate shot up. Who does that? I picked up my pace, heading toward the electronics department, hoping to lose him. That's when I saw a Target employee. I didn't want to make a scene, but I hurried over and quietly told him that a man had been acting strange and seemed to be following me. The employee reassured me, saying he'd keep an eye out and would call security if needed. I felt a bit relieved, but I still couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I figured I'd go back to where I was originally, looking at the skincare products, and try to finish my shopping. I hadn't seen the guy for a few minutes, so maybe he was gone. I spent about 5 more minutes browsing, picked up one last item, and decided it was time to check out. But as I started walking toward the checkout lanes, I froze. There he was again, lingering around the checkout area. He didn't see me yet, but he was pacing back and forth, looking as if he was waiting for someone. Waiting for me, maybe. Panic started to set in. I didn't want to walk past him and risk him following me out into the parking lot, which was dark and almost deserted at this point. The thought of being alone out there with him sent a chill down my spine. I ducked into a nearby aisle, hoping he wouldn't notice me. I waited for a few moments, peeking out occasionally to see if he'd leave, but he didn't. He just kept pacing by the checkouts, glancing around like he was searching for me. My mind was racing with possibilities. What if he followed me to my car? What if he tried something out there, where no one could see us? I considered going back to the employee, but I hesitated. What if they just asked him to leave? That might only make things worse. He could wait for me in the parking lot, where I'd be even more vulnerable. I didn't want to take that chance. In the end, I decided I didn't need the stuff I was buying that badly. It could wait. I carefully put the items back on the shelf and made my way toward the front of the store, sticking close to the closed checkout lanes to stay out of sight. I kept my head low, ducking behind shelves and counters as I moved closer to the exit. My heart was pounding the whole time, and I could feel my hands trembling. When I was close enough to the doors, I bolted. I didn't look back to see if he'd spotted me. I just walked as fast as I could through the automatic doors and into the parking lot. The cold night air hit me, but I didn't stop. I practically sprinted to my car, my keys already in hand, ready to go. I jumped in, locked the doors, and peeled out of the lot. Only when I was a few blocks away did I finally let out a breath. My pulse was still racing, and my hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel. I didn't see him again after that, but the whole experience left me rattled. I haven't been back to that Target since, and honestly, I'm not sure when I'll feel comfortable going again. But when I do, I'm going to be a lot more cautious. You never know what kind of strange, unsettling things might happen, even in a place as ordinary as a Target. I don't think I've ever been what you'd call normal. I mean, even something as simple as running errands feels overwhelming sometimes. Like when I head to the store, I just know it's going to be packed with these so-called normal people. They're living these monotonous lives, doing mundane things, but what really gets to me is how judgmental they are. You can see it in their eyes. They look at me like I'm some kind of freak before they even get a chance to know me. I get it. I do it too sometimes, but only when I feel like I'm being judged. It's like a defense mechanism. But I swear, the way people size you up at first glance can be downright creepy. It's always the same, a quick look, and they've already decided who I am. But here's the thing. I feel more real than most of them. That's probably why the other day at Target ended up the way it did. It wasn't even about needing something. It was more like I just wanted to kill some time with my girlfriend, Sarah. She lives in this area where the suburbs start merging with the countryside, and she told me she used to hang out at this Target after school. Apparently, it was the spot to people watch because it attracted all kinds of weird characters. So yeah, I know it's hypocritical, given how much I hate people staring at me, but we went there to people watch. And honestly, I didn't care. Sarah and I sort of feed off each other's quirks. We get each other in a way that makes even the most awkward outings fun. We only needed to pick up a couple of Mother's Day cards, but we turned the whole store into our own amusement park. It was surreal, wandering through the aisles, surrounded by the saddest, most robotic-looking people you can imagine. It felt like they were all on autopilot, just going through the motions of life, their minds somewhere else. There were times when they'd literally walk right into us with their carts like they didn't even see us. I couldn't help but wonder, is anyone home in those bodies? The crowd was a parade of miserable-looking suburbanites, grumpy couples, gossiping high school girls, and people who looked like they were barely holding it together. And of course, there were a few folks who seemed like aliens in human skin. I'm sure we stood out too, laughing way too loud and cracking jokes without bothering to get out of earshot. I know we must have looked crazy. We'd been in the store for a while, and after getting our fill of people watching, we headed to the card aisle, the most crowded section naturally. It was a madhouse. There was this lady talking way too loud on her phone, a couple trying to wrangle their hyperactive kid, and a bunch of millennials sighing as they tried to pick out the least awkward card for their moms. I found my card pretty quickly. A few seconds, 3 tries, and I was done. Sarah wasn't so lucky. She was crouching down, squinting at the cards on the lower shelf, trying to find one she liked. So, being the supportive boyfriend that I am, I decided to help her out. I found this one card that was a joke. It said something like, "It's Mother's Day, the one day of the year where you don't have to lift a finger. And if anyone asks, you know which one to use." I thought it was hilarious, so I showed it to Sarah. But of course, she didn't get it. Wordplay's not really her thing. "Wait, what finger?" she asked, looking genuinely confused. Without thinking, I flipped her the bird, joking around. And wouldn't you know it? Just as I did, there was this little kid standing right behind her. I had basically given the middle finger to a child. To make matters worse, his massive, bald-headed dad was standing behind him, glaring at me like he was about to explode. I immediately regretted it. The dad's face turned bright red, veins bulging, and before I could explain, he barked, "What the hell are you doing, punk?" I put my hands up defensively, backing away. "I'm really sorry, sir, that wasn't meant for him. I didn't see him there." I tried to sound sincere, but my voice has a way of coming off sarcastic in situations like this. "Don't play coy with me, boy," he snarled. And then, before I could react, he grabbed me by the collar and yanked me close. I could smell the cheap beer and hot wings on his breath as he pulled me toward his face. Sarah gasped and scrambled out of the way. As much as I wanted to avoid a scene, I wasn't about to let this guy bully me in front of his kid. I managed to keep my cool and said, "Look, I'm really sorry, but you're not going to beat me up in front of your kid just because of a middle finger, right?" I couldn't help it. A smug grin crept across my face. This guy was so worked up, I almost found it funny. I figured if I was going to get punched, it might as well be worth the laugh. He tightened his grip and leaned in closer, I just might if you don't shut that mouth. For a second, I thought he was actually going to hit me, but then, out of nowhere, his wife showed up. She'd been picking out a card and apparently hadn't noticed what was going on until now. "Dave," she snapped, rolling her eyes. "We don't have time for this. If you start another one of your fights, you're gonna miss the game. And I'm not dealing with another ER visit." Dave, clearly still fuming, hesitated. But after a moment, he let go of my collar and stormed off with his wife and kid in tow. I stood there, my heart pounding as the other shoppers whispered and stared. Sarah came over, trying to act concerned, but I could tell she found the whole thing kind of funny. "I guess that's part of why we work," she balances me out. We grabbed our cards, paid, and made a quick exit. We laughed about it in the car, but deep down, I was still a little shaken. It's funny how quickly things can escalate over something as dumb as a joke. But hey, that's just another day in the life of people who don't quite fit in.